Hey everybody, welcome to the Blue Chip Podcast by fans for fans. This is your host Cody Potter. We're going to go over a defensive edition for this episode today. So we're going to start with first off, we'll just start with the draft, man. We'll start with Sonny Styles. Getting a player that didn't necessarily think was going to be there. Pretty much hit a home run in my opinion as far as the position flexibility that he offers you. The biggest thing for me for this defense, man, is coming from a team that was last in the NFL in just about every statistical category. We all know that tracking down sideline to sideline has been an issue for this team. Covering tight ends, going to kind of be the narrative of this show. Is how effective tight ends have been against this team. I mean, just for years. I mean, honestly, since pretty much like 07, 08, 09, the Sean Taylor days. I mean, I think we've had one season where we covered them with Jeremy Chin. We added Nick Cross in that spot to kind of take care of that. But there's a lot more flexibility on this defense. Adding Leo Chenal, adding Sonny Styles to this defense, having Jordan McGee, a guy who showed that he can play in this league, whether he's a starter, whether he's a really A+ level backup, rotational piece. There's a lot of flexibility for this defensive front now. This front seven should be completely different. Deron Payne, he gets a lot of criticism because he was basically the only first round player on this defense, the last 2 years. And it's hard for one first rounder when you don't have first round talent around them guys. Getting Javon Kinlaw, he had his games, he had his moments. This defense just was not deep enough at any position last year. The nose tackle position has probably been the strength of this team, and the defensive interior, but lacking on the edges. Well, you added Caleb Chase on, you added, Dafe Owe, Charles Menahu. I basically have been posting a lot about this as far as the defensive versatility that you get from this unit, man. And I think the biggest thing for me is if you want to stop the run on the edges, you have guys that can do it. We know Caleb Chase can do it. We know Charles Menahu is very, very versatile on the outside. He can make his run fits. Sonny Styles now will be flowing down, from the interior sideline to sideline. You can use him on blitz packages. You can use him on stunts. Deron Payne has always been a good interior run stopper. Javon Kinlaw had his moments last year. Jerzon Newton is a guy that I need to see improvement from in that position and things like that. But again, more versatile weapons, a lot of pieces around these guys. I think this is going to be a much more improved defense as far as flowing sideline to sideline, as far as, the front seven play. Playing against Dallas, you're going to have to be able to do that. You're going to have to be able to cover tight ends. Ferguson's a really, really good player. Javonte Williams had a really, really good year last year. Of course, when you have CeeDee Lamb and you have George Pickens outside playing a lot of too high safety, you're gonna give up yards in the run game, man. So you're gonna have to be able to play, really, really good run fits, playing that type of defense over the top. You're basically saying keep everything in front. We'll kind of give you the underneath stuff, but you got to be able to flow to the ball. You got to be able to get them in favorable down and distances, and I think we finally had that. Having Leo Chenal, a guy that can play the run fits on the outside, he plays a little bit of edge, plays a little bit of linebacker. He's a hybrid type of player. Then you got Sonny Styles, very similar, but more from the interior as far as the way that you attack with him. Frankie Louvu from the Jack. We know Frankie Louvu didn't have his best year the year before, but he was a second-team All-Pro the year before. We know what Frankie Louvu can be, very disruptive as far as the jack position and things like that. And the defense is going to be a swarming defense, man. It's going to have to be a bought-in thing. There's going to be a lot of 7-man, 8-man looking fronts, and they're going to drop into coverage and things like that. They're going to drop out in the zones. They're going to have man up on the outside and things like that. But they're going to be trying to bring a lot of interior exotic pressures and things like that to get pressure on the quarterback to get the ball out early. This type of defense should allow the cornerbacks to excel. They should be able to keep their eyes, kind of forward on the quarterback, give up maybe playing 5 yards off. They're going to be playing man and things like that, but they're going to be right in the position to be able to make a play as long as the defensive front does their job. This year you have, more than Dorrance Armstrong outside as far as bringing pressure. You're going to have Caleb Chase on. You're going to have Adafe Owe, his burst and things like that. Charles Menahu, we know, can play, he can get after the passer a little bit in his own right. But again, you're talking about stacking guys in different sets. Dietrich Wise is going to be back. That's going to be another guy that you can deploy into the run stopping from defending the edge. Last year it was basically one or two players at each spot, and it wasn't rotationally. You get caught with this guy on the field on a passing down, you're pretty short. And this year it's we can put this guy in for run sets, and then he can also play the pass. We put this guy in for run sets, he can also play the pass. We can put this guy in on pass sets, but they run the ball. We know he's not a liability. There's going to be more versatility to this defense, man, and I'm very, very excited to see what it does. I've followed Durante Jones. I mean, I remember him at LSU. I remember, he's been a part of this Vikings defense, man, and this is the type of defense that's thriving right now in the league. I think there's a lot more to go into it. I think it's going to be a very good defense for this team. And then, one of my favorite additions to this team is Nick Cross, kind of shoring up the back end and things like that. Nick Cross is a very, very talented player, man. He's very, very fast, very, very physical. He's going to be able to cover these He's going to be able to cover these tight ends and do the things that you had Jeremy Chin doing from that hybrid nickel safety kind of spot. The best season that Quan Martin has had was with Jeremy Chin. This is a guy that gives you that Jeremy Chin skill set. We know Quan Martin is very fast in his own right, very physical in his own right. It's crazy that last year, we talked about all these tackling issues with Quan Martin, but the year before he had 2 shoulder injuries and he was tackling and wasn't missing tackles. So again, there's got to be good communication on the back end. I think Nick Cross is going to be very, very good. We talked a lot about Caleb Downs, and I'm not saying this guy has the same tape as Caleb Downs at Ohio State, but Nick Cross coming out of Maryland was a very, very instinctual, very, very good underneath player in the box and things like that. He can blitz, all the things you're seeing behind me and things like that, but he can cover. He's fast. He's a 4.3 athlete, knows how to tackle, knows how to cover. Are you going to put him out wide against a wide receiver? No, he's not. He's not that type of level of coverage, but no safety generally is. But he's a guy that can get his hands on the football. He can make reads. He can make plays. And I think he's going to take the back end of this defense to a whole nother level, closer to the level that we saw the season before, where the pass defense was at least, pretty damn steady. I mean, they gave up a lot of yards and things like that, but they would get turnovers and things like that. I think Mikey Sammer still, Trey Amos, I think they're projected up. They're 2 guys that I definitely trust. I need to see more tackling and, improvement from that department from Troy Amos. But as far as the coverage ability, I would expect him to have a really, really good year. I think he's going to have a really, really good season. He went up against Malik Neighbors, went up against the George Pickenses of the world. He went, there's no shortage of talented wide receivers in this division, and he's a guy that can hold up against these guys. He's bigger, he's physical, he can do all the things in the passing game department. Now, can he bring these guys on the ground, and can he tackle them on a consistent clip? We're going to have to see that from him. But I think Nick Cross is going to shore up the biggest weakness that this defense had last year. You still have Will Harris. I'm sure Will Harris will get on the field. He's a very, very smart, instinctual safety. I think Will Harris playing this year will be much better than the version of Will Harris that we saw last year when he broke his fibula, early in the season, and then came back off of that and just never really, really got up to speed. But there's more versatility on the front end and the back end of this defense, and I think you're going to see a lot of it with this team. The defense is going to look much, much quicker. They're going to be much faster. This is no longer 36-year-old Bobby Wagner. This is not, Von Miller, as your sole dependent pass rusher on the outside because Dorrance Armstrong went down. There's a lot more versatility on this from each different package that this team has, and they needed to because the depth on the defensive, front was nowhere near sufficient. The defense in the middle of the field, Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu being the only 2 guys, with Jordan McGee. That was your only different package. Now you have guys, Sonny Styles can cover, Kane Medrano can cover. Is Kane Medrano going to take a step in this defense? Now that he's, year 2 as a pro, he got to be with this team all offseason, kind of entails, knows what, is going to go into an NFL season, NFL offseason, things like that. He has a chance to really, really improve his stock. He's a very, very fast. He's a very, very twitchy, rangy coverage linebacker. Can he improve on the tackling and improve his eyes on the things that, he kind of gets caught up in and gets, a little bit slower at? I'm going to be very, very curious to see how he performs this preseason and into training camp and things like that. But Leo Chenal can cover. Sonny Styles can cover. Basically, improving from the inside out is always the best way to do it. You already had the interior pressure, the interior defense, whether it was the run stop or the pass game. Daron Payne, we know, can get after the quarterback. This defense is going to give him an opportunity to not just do that, but he is, familiar with the two-gap scheme. So he's going to make plays. He's going to, clog up lanes. He's going to open up plays for the linebackers behind him in the two gap. And when he shoots the gap, we know that he can get to the quarterback. We know that he can get to the running back and blow up plays in the backfield. So, again, man, it's just having versatility on all levels of this front. Last year, we were nowhere near deep enough. This year, I commend Adam Peters for really, really elevating the talent, threshold on every level of this front seven. Securing another young piece on the back end, and Nick Cross, who has the talent to be, in my opinion, a Pro Bowl safety, could even play up to a higher level than that, in the right defense. And I think this is the right type of defense for him. So, the sky's the limit for a guy like Nick Cross. Coming here, he's a hometown kid. You're going to get the best out of him. Him and Mikey Samerstill, I think, are just going to be two guys that I think, from what you missed from the Jeremy Chin role and the Will Harris role last year, I think what you're going to get out of Nick Cross and Mikey Samerstill this year, I think you're going to get plus level play from both of those guys. They're very, very talented players. They both can work the nickel very, very well. Amik Robertson is a guy that can cover well from the nickel. He's a smaller guy, but he still brings everything that you want from that type of player at that position. Might not have the best size. He's a smaller guy, but he will tackle. He's a very, very big high energy player. And that's I think going to be the theme about this defense, man. Is it's going to have to be high energy on the back end. And they got the type of players to do it. Long term, I think this team could use an upgrade at the corner position still. I think this year was not the year to do it. I kept saying it. All the years that I scout, defensive backs and cornerbacks and things like that, man, this was not the year that I would have wanted to take one up high. I did like Mansour Delane. I understand he's going to be a very, very good player, but he was not the player that, when I'm grading out, if I'm picking a cornerback in the top 10, top 5, pick number 7, that 5 to 10 range. If I'm picking a cornerback, man, it's got to be like what you're going to get out of this next year's class, whether it be Kelly Jones, Leonard Moore. Those are two guys that I'm very, very high on going into this next season, man. When I do my breakdown for the 2027 class, going into the season, I'll talk a lot about these guys. But this is just something that this team is going to need a lot more of, man. Caleb Chason, this is a guy that I really, really think is going to excel here in this defense, man. He had a really, really good year with Mike Vrabel and them guys, for all the love that Mike Vrabel's getting, for taking that team to the Super Bowl and, turning that team around for the New England Patriots, man. Like, Dan Quinn is a really, really good defensive coach in his own right. I think him and Durante Jones are really, really going to get the best out of this defense, and now they finally got some weapons on all three levels, inside and outside, to finally make an impact on this team. The defense has struggled for way too long. Caleb Chason, 1 year, $12 million deal. If you told me next offseason we're signing this guy to, something similar to what we just paid Odafe Owe as the 4 for 100, 50, 60 million guaranteed, basically a 2.5 year contract, 2-3 year contract, basically, as far as the guaranteed money goes. I could very much see it, man. Caleb Chason is a very, very instinctual, very, very disruptive football player on the edge. Can play the run, can also get after the quarterback in the pass game, man. It finally clicked for him in New England. I think it clicked for him his last season before he went to New England, and then really, really turned it on in last year in New England. So I think you're going to get a guy this year playing his best football, man, really, really trying to get to that big deal, man. And I think this guy could really, really elevate this defense to a different level that they have not been in a long time, especially from the edge position. Again, breaks plays up in the backfield, high motor, high energy, the type of player that you want, man. Just not going to give up on a play. He is a good tackler. Like I said, disruptive. I think you're gonna get the best version of Caleb Chase on here, man, and I'm very, very excited to see what that version is. Him and Leo Chenal. Leo Chenal is just a guy that I'm very, very curious to see how they use, man, because he's just going to be all over this defense. Could be, in a 3-4 front, 3-4 outside linebacker, whether he comes in pressure or drops into coverage, man, he's very, very comfortable in both. I'm comfortable with deploying him in both, and I expect him to have a very, very good impact on this team, man. Honestly, Leo Chenal, man, he's a wild card player. He's the type of player that on tape, when you watch him rush, he's very, very good at it. And then when you watch him in coverage, you're like, man, he's very, very good at it. And you watch him with the Chiefs, and you know how Steve Spagnuolo deploys that defense, man. He's very, very versatile with his sets, mixes and matches his fronts all the time, and he's very, very versatile with his defense. So you're getting somebody who's very, very familiar with how we're going to deploy him. Again, Caleb Chase on the same thing. Defenses that are very, 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 very different in fronts and different stylistically. From this set, you're going to rush in this play, and then the next play you're going to drop out in that same set, and it's very, very confusing for an offense. It starts to dictate what offenses can and cannot do. Sometimes they just take certain plays out of their playbook just because they're like, we know what's coming here, and it's either going to be this or it's going to be that. But either way, we're not going to have the time for this type of shot. And again, I think we got guys that are coming from teams that have played very, very versatile fronts and very, very versatile sets. We saw Odafe Owe when he got to Jesse Minter with the Los Angeles Chargers. When he got into a more versatile front than what they had been deploying over there in Baltimore, it really, really elevated his game, more like what he was playing like at Penn State. So again, sometimes it's not about, it took this guy some time, It's always usually schematical fit. It's how teams deploy the players. And now that we're getting guys that are going to fit the type of defense that we're going to run in Odafe Owe, and I honestly think that Dorrance Armstrong is going to fit that type of scheme. He did it in Dallas with Dan Quinn. It's got to be to have a versatile defense, man. To be able to show blitz. You got 7 guys down on the front, 8 guys maybe down on the front, and you send 5 and drop 3 of them in coverage and things like that. It's very, very it's very, very detail oriented, man. There's got to be a lot of communication. Guys got to be able to do both different aspects of it. I can't drop you down and then they know you're coming every play. This is the versatility that this defense is going to allow. The defense is going to have with these type of players that can either drop back in coverage or come after the quarterback, man. It's going to allow this team a lot more flexibility to be more impactful, not just in the passing game, not just in getting pressure on the quarterback, but in the running department too. So again, I'm very excited for what I've seen. It's always exciting on paper. You're going to be excited after every offseason, after every edition. You just hope they all peak. You hope they all hit their their best markers and things like that. But again, at the end of the day, it's got to happen on the football field. We have rookie minicamp this week. I don't know how much you're going to necessarily see the team on the field, but I am very, very excited to see these guys when they do get into voluntary minicamps and mandatory minicamps. What's going to come out of those situations and things like that. So again, very, very excited for the moves that we've made. This defense should be much more improved. I mean, even just middle of the pack would be a huge step up from anything that Jaden Daniels has had in his career so far. And if you can get him the ball, 3 more times a game, where it's 3 and outs or, a turnover here or there. I mean, giving Jaden Daniels more shots, at not playing catch-up ball, trying to keep up or, I got to score here to hold a lead. But we can actually get stops on this defense consistently. This team can be very, 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 very much more improved. I'm assuming that they're going to make another wide receiver signing at some point this offseason. I haven't really brought his name up, but it could be a Tyreek Hill. That speed would go a long way for this team. I haven't really mentioned him going into this offseason. I wasn't really, really high on it because of the severity of the knee injury. We'll see what his rehab looks like and things like that, but that speed element would go a long way for this offense, especially with what Jaden Daniels offers you from the quarterback position. Again, coming into the offseason, I wasn't very, very high on making a Tyreek Hill type addition. But again, if you added Antonio Williams, you got Terry McLaurin outside. If the Brandon Ayuk situation just gets completely out of hand and things like that, then I mean maybe you do go the Tyreek Hill route for 1 year. I think the quarterback skill set matches very, very up. It would blend very, very well with what Tyreek Hill and his skill set has always been. Tyreek Hill is not necessarily the blocking level player that you're going to look for at the wide receiver position. It would be more gadget and schematical, where you're still going to probably have, Dammy Brown or certain guys, kind of come in on different sets and things like that, where, Tyreek Hill's coming on the field, the defenses just have to be mindful of that speed. It might be just more schematic type of impact, where I think Brandon Ayuk would actually play a lot more, percentage of snaps than what I think a Tyreek Hill would. But you're going to get to a certain point in this offseason where you got to get a contract. You got to get a player under contract. There's a certain skill set that you're looking for. To me, it's more outside than inside. So, I mean, there's certain guys that just really, really don't fit for me. To me, Jamon Jennings is a more inside guy than out. We have a lot more inside guys than outside guys on this roster. To me, that's why I'm starting to come around on the Tyreek Hill kind of thing, because I think the speed would just be a very, very good weapon to have for Jaden Daniels. Hitting the ball outside, it could actually be deadly in this offense. I mean, depending on where Tyreek Hill is with his recovery and things like that. But we'll get more into that as the offseason kind of gets into play. I do expect one more signing from the wide receiver position to be on this team. I'm sure they might, add another player or two on defense here or there. Maybe a name player as far as it goes. Maybe a aged veteran or something that you want, to solidify one more position on your field once you've seen them in mini camps and things like that. And you're like, this rookie needs a little bit more time or something like that. I'm not even opposed to bringing Bobby Wagner back. Having Bobby Wagner work with Sonny Styles, this offseason would be really, really good. It would have to be very much under the consideration of Bobby. You are going to turn this over to, Sonny Styles. You're going to play certain downs and distance packages and things like that. But you're going to be more of a coach on the field. You will get on the field because we have that type of respect for you, but it's got to be under certain packages and certain positions. Again, I expect there to be a few veteran signings and things like that over the course of the next, month or whatever before we get into camp, or, during camp. There's always injuries and things like that make you have to go out and sign, other undrafted free agents or free agents coming off of other teams' practice squads and things like that. So again, we'll get into that. But from the defensive standpoint, man, I'm very, very excited to see what this unit can be. I mean, it's only up from here. If they're in the same range that they were last year, I think a lot of people will be on the chopping block this year as far as the coaching staff goes. You can't bring in a defensive head coach, make these type of additions, and not show vast improvement. Injuries are not going to be an excuse this year. I mean, if it all blows up and falls apart as far as injuries go, I mean, then it's just terrible luck in that regard anyway. But then, then there's got to start being questions about preparations and things like that. And what are you doing in practice? What are you doing in, behind the scenes? Is the training staff up to snub? There's something going on at that point if you're consistently having injury plague seasons back to back to back to back to back. So again, football is an unlucky game. There are injuries. It is a part of it, but the season enders and things like that, you got to find a way to be able to move past those and things like that. It was a terrible luck season last year. We got to move past that. I think we made the type of moves that say younger, faster, stronger, bigger. I think that we have the type of defense that can hold up, in the NFL this year. So I'm very, very excited to see the growth for this team overall. I think Trey Amos can have a really, really good year. If I had to highlight like 5 players, other than Nick Cross and Sonny Styles, I mean, I would say it would be Mikey Samerstill, Trey Amos, and I think Deron Payne. I think Deron Payne could have an amazing season this year. He's always been a really, really good player, and I know we shit on him a lot here because he is our most expensive player. He is our only first-round player, outside of Sonny Styles now on this defense that we've picked. But again, it's just now. I mean, there are more first-round players on this defense now. Kayvon Chaisson, Javon Kinlaw. Now you got Sonny Styles. You're starting to get some players. Trey Amos, 2nd-round pick, could have been a first-rounder. Another talented safety in Nick Cross, who went pretty high in the draft. Not because he was a first rounder, but because safeties don't tend to go in the first round. A second, third round safety, it's usually graded out pretty damn high, just for the positional value. So again, there's a lot more talent on this defense. I think the stylistic match, pieces on this defense that they've added, I think there should be a lot of improvement around this team. How far can they go? I don't know. I think the sky is the limit for the team. Do I think they're going to be top 5? No. I don't. I think a lot of things would have to go, seriously right for that. I mean, you'd have to be, top 3 in turnovers, I think, to be a top 5 defense for this group. There are still some deficiencies that I see from the cornerback position, maybe the free safety position, depending on the level of play Quan Martin gives you as far as coming back from that. But again, we'll see what it is. But I would expect, top 15, top 12, somewhere in that range. I expect that type of leap from a bottom, the bottom defense in the NFL last year. That's a huge leap. It would go leaps and bounds for the overall, consistency of this team. And as far as the offensive impact and the defensive impact, that would go a long way. So again, from the Blue Chip Podcast, man, I really appreciate you guys checking in and tuning out. You can like, comment, subscribe. Anytime you leave a comment, I will always get back to you. I do appreciate it. I appreciate all the views and things like that. So again, everybody have a safe, blessed week. The offseason is, underway. We're basically going to football now. We're finally going to start seeing guys in pads. We're going to start seeing guys with new numbers. A lot of things to be excited about for the season, man. But the season is coming. We are now heading towards the season and not away from last season. So it's officially that time in the offseason. It's going to be a lot of reporting. Like I said, training camp, things like that. I'll be talking a lot more about college football in the upcoming months, and that's more my shtick anyway. So again, thank you guys for checking out the pod, man. Have a blessed week. Stay safe.